Welcome back to Story of Growth, the podcast where we dive deep into the moments that transform us. I'm your host, and today we're talking about something that makes most of us want to hide under a blanket and pretend it never happened: failure. But what if I told you that your biggest mistake might actually be your greatest teacher in disguise? Today, I'm joined by Sarah Chen, a successful restaurant owner here in Portland, who's going to share a story that will completely change how you think about failure. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I have to say, talking about my biggest failure still makes my palms sweaty, but I'm excited to share it.
Perfect. That means it's exactly the kind of story our listeners need to hear. Before we dive in, tell us a bit about where you are now in your journey.
Sure. Today, I own 3 successful restaurants in Portland. We employ about 80 people, and last year we were featured in Food and Wine magazine. But 5 years ago, I was bankrupt, divorced, and sleeping on my sister's couch, wondering how I'd managed to destroy everything I'd worked for.
Wow, that's quite a transformation. Take us back to that lowest point. What happened?
So, picture this. It's 2019, and I'm 32 years old. I'd been dreaming of opening my own restaurant since culinary school, and I finally had my chance. My grandfather left me $150,000, and I thought I had it all figured out. I was going to open this upscale fusion restaurant in the Pearl District. You know, the kind of place where a single appetizer costs $18 and the menu changes daily based on what's seasonally inspired.
Sounds ambitious. What could go wrong, right?
Everything, literally everything. But here's the thing. I was so blinded by my vision of what I thought success looked like that I ignored every red flag waving in my face. First, I'd never actually run a restaurant before. I was a great chef, sure, but running a business? I had no clue. I was spending money like it was Monopoly cash. $40,000 on this gorgeous imported Italian coffee machine, $15,000 on custom lighting that created the perfect ambiance but was impossible to maintain.
It sounds like you were building your dream restaurant without considering the practical side.
Exactly. And then COVID hit in March 2020. We'd been open for exactly 4 months. 4 months of hemorrhaging money, by the way, because I was too proud to pivot. I kept thinking, this is just a rough patch. People will appreciate quality eventually. When the lockdown started, I had to lay off my entire staff. 12 people who'd believed in my vision. I'll never forget calling Maria, my sous chef, and hearing her voice break when I told her she lost her job. She was a single mom, and I'd promised her job security.
That must have been devastating.
It was. But the worst part wasn't the business failing. It was realizing how my arrogance and stubbornness had hurt real people. My marriage fell apart because I'd refused to listen to my husband's concerns about our finances. I'd liquidated our savings, maxed out credit cards, and when he tried to have conversations about scaling back, I accused him of not believing in me. By December 2020, it was over. The restaurant closed, I filed for bankruptcy, and David, my ex-husband, he was done. He moved out the day after Christmas, and honestly, I don't blame him.
So there you were, everything you'd worked for, gone. How did you even begin to pick up the pieces?
You know what's funny? The turning point came when I stopped trying to pick up the pieces and started examining them instead. I spent the first few months after everything collapsed feeling sorry for myself, blaming COVID, blaming the economy, blaming everyone except the person in the mirror. But my sister, bless her heart, she staged what I call a loving intervention. She sat me down one day and said, "Sarah, you can keep being a victim of circumstances, or you can figure out what you actually learned from this disaster."
That's tough love right there.
It was exactly what I needed to hear. So I started writing. Every day, I'd write down one thing I'd done wrong and one thing I'd learned from it. Not in a self-punishment way, but genuinely trying to understand my mistakes. The biggest revelation was this. I had confused confidence with competence. I was confident in my cooking abilities, absolutely. But I'd never learned how to read financial statements, how to manage cash flow, and how to build systems that could survive disruption.
That's such an important distinction. How did that realization change your approach?
Everything changed. Instead of jumping back into another big venture, I started small. I began cooking for a local food truck, someone else's business, someone else's risk. For 6 months, I learned how a profitable food operation actually worked. I saw how they managed inventory, how they adopted their menu based on what sold, how they built relationships with regular customers. Then I started a small catering business from my sister's kitchen. Just me, simple comfort food, weddings, and corporate events. No fancy imported equipment, no $18 appetizers, just good food that people actually wanted to pay for.
And that grew into where you are today?
Step by step. The catering business taught me about customer service, about building a reputation, about managing money. When I finally opened my first restaurant 2 years later, it was a tiny 20-seat breakfast place. Nothing glamorous, but it was profitable from month 3. Here's what I learned. Failure isn't the opposite of success. It's the raw material of success. Every mistake I made in that first restaurant became a strength in my next venture. I knew how to spot cash flow problems early. I knew how to create systems that could adapt. Most importantly, I knew how to listen to feedback instead of being defensive about it.
I love that quote. Failure isn't the opposite of success, it's the raw material of success. What would you say to someone who's in their own valley right now, dealing with a major setback?
First, I'd tell them that the pain they're feeling is real and valid. Don't rush to the everything happens for a reason stage. Sit with the disappointment first. But then, when you're ready, ask yourself this question. What is this failure trying to teach me that success never could? For me, success had taught me to be confident, but failure taught me to be humble. Success had taught me to trust my instincts, but failure taught me to trust my team. Success had taught me to dream big, but failure taught me to build strong.
That's beautiful. As we wrap up, I have to ask, do you ever regret that first restaurant failing?
Never. Not anymore. That failure was the greatest teacher I never wanted but desperately needed. It stripped away everything I thought I knew about myself and forced me to rebuild from the foundation up. The restaurants I have today aren't just more successful than that first one, they're built on a completely different foundation of humility, resilience, and genuine connection with my community.
Any final words for our listeners who might be facing their own failing forward moment?
Yes, your current chapter is not your final story. The mistake you're living through right now, it's not your identity, it's your education. Trust the process, trust the lessons, and most importantly, trust that the person you become on the other side of this failure will be someone you're proud to be.
Sarah Chin, everyone, thank you for sharing your story with such honesty and courage.
Thank you for having me.
To all our Story of Growth listeners, here's your challenge. Think about a recent setback or disappointment in your life. Instead of asking, why did this happen to me? Try asking, what is this trying to teach me? Write down your answer and sit with it for a few days. You might be surprised by what you discover. If today's episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear Sarah's story. And don't forget to subscribe to Story of Growth wherever you get your podcasts. We're here every week with stories that remind us that our setbacks are setups for comebacks. Until next time, keep growing, keep failing forward, and remember, your next chapter is waiting to be written.